All right. I'm trying to see my screen. It's not going to come up here. OK, it is coming. But I can't see the title. Oh, my goodness. Sorry. I'm not used to this sort of, this is very sophisticated. In England, it's not like this. Honestly, I promise. Is there a way we can get it back to the very top of the title? Sorry. Thank you. Perfect. OK, right. We made it in the end. So lovely to be here. It's amazing, and it's just amazing to see all the interest on the responsible side of AI, which is the most important part of AI. But before I get started, by quick show of hands, how many of you absolutely love AI? Or IAS? Wow, we have about 70% of the audience. And we have some people here. OK, and how many of you are not really happy about it? You're in between. You're not sure if you like the technology, OK? All right, this is about 0.01% of the audience, OK? And how many of you don't care? Like, you can't be bothered, you know, whether it's here or not, you really don't care. OK, that's good. So we don't have anyone that doesn't care about AI. This is incredible. I was in Mauritius last week, and I asked this question, and it was about the same sentiment of people who don't care, and even the same sentiment of people who are not really worried about it. All right, so let's imagine ourselves in a world, either as students or business owners or family members, where you have assistants all the time, right? So if you're talking to Siri, and Siri doesn't say, I don't understand. And you can tell Siri, oh, tell me what my day's like today. How many lectures do I have? How many meetings do I have? Who is the meeting with? And you have this conversation, and then you're going to your coffee maker, and you're saying, make me some coffee, right? And you're having the smart home. And at the end of the day, you know, by 12 o'clock, once it's lunchtime, you're able to sit down. You're not feeling stressed and tired and hungry, but you're just able to sit down and go, this seems to be a very nice day because I have all the help that I need. And by the end of the day, you know, 6 o'clock, whatever time that you close for work and for school, you feel actually empowered. You feel happy because you did not do all the mundane tasks, the mind-numbing things that you tend to do. You had so much help from an assistant who wasn't getting too annoying or temperamental or emotional, you know, or whatever issues that you normally face on a day-to-day basis. That would be a great world, I believe. And that's the world that we may end up in, right, with AI. So AI is here to be an assistive technology. It's here to help improve people's lives. It's here to help with productivity and efficiency. It's here to actually make us more human again. That's what I believe. But on the flip side, it's like a newborn baby, right? It has its issues, and its issues are so detrimental and so important that the whole world needs to know about it. And that's what I'm here to talk about, especially with the lens of education. So we're going to talk about empowering education, navigating AI through a responsible AI framework. Now, before I get started, it's always good to, like, you know, lay the playing field down. You know, some people feel they know what AI is, and some people feel they don't. So it's always good to just define it, right? What is AI? In simple terms, it's just technologies that are meant to mimic human intelligence. It's meant to mimic what we do. And that's why when ChatGPT became a thing, people are like, oh my God, it's able to talk. It's talking back at me. It's reasoning. And even if half of what it says is nonsense and it's not factual, it's still being able to reason. So these technologies are being built to mimic human beings and almost, you know, not replace human beings, but just assist human beings. That should be the whole purpose. All right, so what's a very quick history of AI? How many of you have heard about Alan Turing? How many of you know him personally? That's how, that's how I know who's 105 years old here. So yeah, Alan Turing is considered one of the fathers of AI. Unfortunately, he took his life because of the terrible homosexual laws that were in the UK at the time. And he was a great man, highly intelligent, and he came up with the Alan Turing test of can you make machines think, right? And in 1956, Alan Turing and some of his mates, you know, they met in the US in Stanford and came up with the term AI. And why I always bring up his story is because I feel if Alan Turing was still allowed to live, we might not be having this conversation today, right? We may not be driving ethical AI and responsible AI and saying, you know, we need to reduce the amount of injustices and stereotypes in the system because this guy was gay. and he would have been able to come with a perspective of, hey, let's build the system that, let's build these technologies that favor people like me. And then it would have been more open for other people, right? For people who are probably disabled or ableism, for people from different racial backgrounds and beliefs. And it would have been a more diverse society and technology that we're building. Right now, it's not, It's only Caucasian male that are building this technology. And that's one of the reasons we have these issues today. All right, so very quick timeline on AI. We had a mechanical machine that was built by a Frenchman, Blaise Pascal, in the 1600s, and after that, we had Ada Lovelace come up with something very similar in the 1800s, and then we had a friend here, Alan Turing, and in 1956, they actually came up with a name, and let's call it artificial intelligence. I'm sure if anyone had told them it would be a scary word right now, they probably wouldn't have believed it. And in 1965, we had the very first language model built, which was called ELIZA, and that was, so we can say that's ChatGPT's forefather, or foremother, because the name was ELIZA. And in 2011, we had IBM's Watson, so we had an AI system actually beat a human being in a game, and that was the beginning of the problems that we started facing. And then we had the AlphaGo, which was built by DeepMind in 2016, and again, that beat a human being. And then by 2022, voila, everybody started thinking about AI and talking about AI and going, AI this, ChatGPT that. I mean, I think it got to a stage where people just thought AI equals ChatGPT. That's what it is. Is there anybody here that was guilty of that? Yeah, okay. So that's fair. But AI has been here a long time. And over the years, we've gone through these AI winters and summers where you have the research scientists promise heaven and earth. We'll be able to do this and do that. And then eventually, the capabilities and the things that they promised were not fulfilled. And the investors just withdraw their money and pump it into somewhere else. But that has changed, right, over time. And we had the AI arms race, which really started from OpenAI, who just came up with ChatGPT, and then all the other big techs started chasing, we can't be left behind. And we had, the text-to-image generators from OpenAI, DALL-E, and Google came up with theirs, and then OpenAI came up with another, and Google chased with Bard. And then we have Meta coming up with Llama 2. Amazon has its own thing, and, this whole race started. And then after that, within a month, ChatGPT had over, 100 million users, and we have so many different tools now plugged into these APIs, all to generate, revenue, help productivity, and all around generative AI and AI. And because of that, right, it's actually forecasted by 2030 that the AI marketing revenue is going to be $2 trillion. We'll see. We'll see, but it's very promising. It has a lot of prospects. Fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of people are not even aware of it, but once they just hear AI, boop, they just put some money into it. All right, so why is AI important? And this is very important for us to know, right, because AI is actually a technology that should be used for good, and it has so much potential. But of course, it has issues, but let's look at the positive first before we think about the negative issues. So why is AI important? It's important across so many different fields. It's helping achieve the SDG goals, the UN's SDG goals, especially towards zero hunger. It's helping with security. It's being used in judicial systems. Again, it has issues with facial recognition, but it's something that is actually supposed to help make the work of people easier. Lots of economic empowerment and promises that can come from AI. It helps in education, environmental sector, public and private sector, and on it goes, right? It's helping with natural disasters and stuff like that. This is an example from Google. One that I actually find very interesting, and I always talk about in my talk. So this young man here is Dimitri. He has a speech impairment. And Google has used AI over the years to work on a project called Project Euphonia, which uses conversational AI. And it's kind of like attached to his brain neurons, and he's able to decipher and understand what he's trying to communicate to people that are working with him and to his family. So it takes his thoughts and his communication and brings it out into some form of speech that someone else can understand. So now Dimitri suddenly is being able to be understood by people he's been trying to communicate with for years that cannot understand him. This is one of the great things, of AI. It's usually a field called AI for good. I don't think we should even have a field for that. Like, AI should be used for good regardless. And there's so many other examples. Microsoft is using it for climate change, to help with the climate change crisis. Google is using it as well. Microsoft has some projects in Bangladesh, and there's so many SMEs and startups as well, nonprofits that are using AI to help, solve some of the problems that are facing their different countries and regions. But, when you have a baby, the baby cries, the baby eats, and the baby poops. And if it's a boy, it might pee in your face. So with AI, it's very similar, right? It's like we have challenges. You have a newborn baby. You find it hard to sleep the first few nights if it's a typical baby. Some people say their babies are good till 6 months later, and they start complaining. But it's normal. There are always challenges with any new and nascent technology, and it's the same with AI. So let's look at some of the horror, gory stories. We have this guy here. His name is Robert Williams. He's a young man in Detroit. One day, he was driving home, about to park in his driveway. Kids were probably inside or outside. His wife was around. Daddy's back. And the next thing, the police guys come to him, come with me, handcuff him, and take him to jail. And the guy's like, what did I do? What did I do? You've got the wrong man. I'm not a criminal. And the next day, they released him. But what happened? Facial recognition, CCTV, identified him as a wrong man who boggled a grocery store or a hardware store a few weeks ago. This is just one example of so many other examples, right? We have a lot of people. We have Caucasian men, people being arrested as well for crimes they did not commit. But when you compare it with people from African-American descent, the ratio, the percentage is so much higher. It's about 67% higher. And it's not just with arrests. It's like, even with image recognition, with images and stuff like that, it's always a very detrimental percentage for people who are non-white, right? Non-Caucasians. Why is this happening? Because the data sets that are being built are not diverse enough. They're not inclusive. It's not representing everyone in society. But then we're building technologies for everyone in society. So what happens, these technologies will not represent, they will not be in favor for everyone, but only for the select few, the majority of the representations in the data sets. All right. Amazon had a hiring tool a few years ago that was discriminating against women. Wow. Like, how can technology discriminate against people? What is going on here? We as human beings, we're still having conversations around, being more open and less biased towards our fellow human beings, having less unconscious bias, being aware of our biases, the systemic injustices, the prejudices, stereotypes, inequality. We're still talking about the gender pay rate gap today. And then it goes into technology. That's where it gets scary because, one, you can't track it. You don't even know if it's there until, some research scientist probes it, tests it, and goes, wow, look at all the biases in this thing. That's what happened with Amazon. So Amazon had this tool for about 3 years. It was built on male CVs in the data sets. So anytime a woman's CV came up, it dropped it. It didn't recognize it because it didn't recognize the words of the colleges and the universities that the women said they studied. And it only recognized the male CVs. This tool was out there, being adopted, right, being used by companies. So there were so many women's lives that were impacted. Imagine a woman who probably went on maternity leave, for example, came back, and if you have a major life event, especially for women who take time off work and come back, they're already struggling. And then you're struggling and you're trying to apply for a new job, and you're just not getting it. And you cannot imagine the psychological impact it has on that person, on their career trajectory, and on their entire life. And then think about the income. These women probably never had an income. And this is how far these problems go. And it's hard to measure. The only way we found this out was because Abiba Berhan, who is a research scientist in Ireland, did some testing on the model, on the tool. I don't know why she decided, but I think that the research scientists just decided to test these things, the responsible AI ones. And they found out this problem, and then guess what Amazon did? They didn't fix it, they just deprecated it, took it off, because it takes too much effort to fix. And they're not a hiring company anyway. Apple Card had another issue. So you have a couple, a male and a female, who have the exact same credit rating, apply for credit, and they may have the same income, exact same everything when it comes to income and money, and the man will have a higher credit than the woman. Goldman Sachs said, oh, because they're the ones behind it, they said, oh, no, it's fair. But it's not true. The next example came from Google in 2018, where someone saw a picture of his friend, and Google Photos labeled the picture of this black American as a gorilla. And it was all over the news. It came back into the news. Another problem when it comes to data sets and labeling and training the data sets to be fair and inclusive. Steven Schwartz is a lawyer from New York. This is a very recent case, who almost lost his license as a lawyer because he built a lot of legal cases from ChatGPT, and they were all false. And he didn't think of fact-checking it. And eventually, he's got fined $5,000. He's lucky he did not lose his job. But there's a lot of issues with AI, generative AI, when it comes to not just bias, but incorrect information, misinformation, and so on and so forth. Generative AI, especially large language models like ChatGPT and chatbots, are accused of hallucinating. I don't believe AI systems are sentient. In other words, they do not have a soul. Because we cannot infuse a soul in them. So they don't have any human-like features. So even using the term hallucinations is probably not the best. But let's stick with hallucinations. We have this chatbot, again called Eliza, from a company called Chai. And it was able to convince a man from Belgium who was in his 30s that if he takes his own life, he'll be able to save the world from climate change. And this poor man believed this chatbot and took his own life. He was a father of 2 kids, and he left a wife behind. This happened earlier on this year. And when this happened, it was more like a case of, oh my God, it's happening now. People are actually taking their lives because they're being misled by terrible built technologies, and this should not be happening. In the UK, a few years ago, there was biases in the exam algorithm, and students really protested, and it was favoring people from private schools and from the rich postcodes as opposed to the students who came from poor socioeconomic neighborhoods. Also, with generative AI, there's a bias existence in the AI tool detection, and if they're checking to see if students are actually cheating on the exams, it's going to favor people who are English speakers as opposed to non-native speakers, even with a false percentage rate of 97% accuracy, where it's saying that, the students actually cheated and they used ChatGPT, but because the student's first language is not English, it doesn't recognize that, and that student did not use ChatGPT. So these bias problems keep on recurring. Right. So now that I've got all of you crying and thinking that, let's get rid of AI, let's get rid of this terrible technology, why do we have it today? I'm here to say we do have some good news, right? There is a lot of work being done in the responsible AI field that can be used to help mitigate some of these risks and harms that I've talked about. So I came up with a responsible AI framework. It's in my book as well, Building Responsible AI Algorithms. And it's basically just thinking about making sure you have a responsible hat on, right? Do we think we should be responsible towards these technologies that we're building? And even if we're adopting it, even if we're not building it, do we think we need to be responsible as humans? We should. And then after that, we need to lay out a foundation, implement, and have some form of ethical considerations that encompasses the whole. What does the framework look like? We have AI principles, which basically means, setting some form of principles in your organization that says these are the things that your AI system is going to do, as opposed to these are the things that your AI system is not going to do. For example, biases, right? It's not going to reinforce any societal biases. It's going to be transparent. It's going to be private, reinforce privacy preservations for people's data and stuff like that. And then you want to outline the things that your AI system would definitely not do, like build weapons of mass destruction, and so on and so forth. The next thing is data ethics. I've talked a little bit about it. The data curation methods. How's your data being sourced? Is it inclusive and diverse? Who does it represent? Do people even know that the data is being used to build these models? Fairness is another field in responsible AI, which really addresses the biases that I've talked about. And there are lots of fairness tools that are out there that you can use to test your models before launching them. Safety, online safety is very important, and there's lots of tests that can be done. And based on the results, the models can be fine-tuned and improved so that the results are not bad and, like that man who took his life. Ideally, that shouldn't have happened. Explainability is another one in the responsible AI field, and it's part of the framework that just really covers transparency. You know, many times because AI systems are built on neural networks, we cannot determine and understand why it came up with its results. So with transparency, there are lots of documentation that can be done, right? Just to provide some more explanation on the data sources and the models. Humans in the loop is another thing, which is really working with the raters, making sure that these data sets are properly labeled with a responsible AI policy. We need to protect people's privacy. We need to make sure that the models are robust enough so that we do not have any hackers come into play. And overall ethical considerations. Think about the amount of energy consumption that large language models bring, or think about the well-being of the raters, who many times suffer from PTSD because they're going through a lot of toxic content. So I'm going to end up with this, right? AI is a very powerful tool. It is helpful, and it's here to stay, whether we like it or not. But a lot of people in this room like it anyway, so that's great. And it's here to make your life easier, right? But it's very important for us to be literate on this technology, right? Before we even adopt it, before we use it, so let's understand its pros, its cons, its limitations, and how we can actually use it for our good. But, you know, making sure that we leverage its benefits and see how much we can reduce the harms that it brings to society. All right, thank you.
Well done. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have you here. I think we're going to get a chair, maybe a little table, maybe some water,
yes,
and we'll grab a seat here. Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here. Liz from South Summit. And I have the luxury of diving a little deeper now into conversation with Toju. So we've given a nice kind of round world tour of what's going on. Think you've terrified some of us? Can I do this again? So how many people in the room still are really excited about AI? I think that number is going down a little bit, but no worries, no worries. We're here to sort that out. And thank you so much, Toju, for being here with us. First timer to Madrid?
Yes.
How are you finding the city so far?
It's amazing. It's like I was walking on the street. I was like, this is a bit like New York. I hope I'm not offending anyone, but it's really nice.
No. I've heard that from a few friends. It's like New York, but it's way more accessible, right? Speaking of accessibility, it's like a mini version, and there's so much more to offer, and it's so culturally rich and all different aspects. So I know it's a short trip, and I hope you get to come back again. The invitation will be open.
I'll probably move here, actually.
And it's so nice to be in this building, so iconic, and such an iconic street in this city. So we're so glad to be having this conversation here in the city at such a relevant time. I'm blown away by what you have presented to us, and I just want to, because we have such a young delegation in the audience as well, and we're intergenerational now in this forum, I'd love to understand how you got here, right? This is, you have a startling career, an unexpected career also, I would say. I don't know if you came out of university planning to be a champion for responsibility in AI and ethics, right? It was probably something that really didn't even exist. So I'd love to understand a little bit your personal story when we're going back to the human-centric, right? And back to the human element of all of this. Where are you coming from, and how did you get here? And so we can understand your trajectory a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Nigerian born, spent some time in the UK as a kid, and then went back to Nigeria. And if you're from any either African-American family, there are only 3 professions that exist. It's either a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. Nothing else exists, right? If you're a lecturer, you're like, nothing else. So growing up, I had only those 3 options. So I chose to be a doctor because, anytime I said it, my dad's friends were happy to hear that I wanted to be a doctor. I had no idea what it entailed. But by the time I got to secondary school and I was about to graduate, I was like, nope, I'm not going to be a doctor. Because in Nigeria, they have a lot of university strikes, and doctors could end up being 10 years in university without graduating. And I heard that they don't have a life, they don't have parties, they're always studying. And I was like, that's not for me, life is too short. But it was a bit too late to change my mind. So I wanted to go into journalism, took the exams, the A-levels exams. I didn't do too well. They said you don't have an arts brain, I was told. You're a science person. So I ended up studying social sciences, which was sociology and political science. I loved political science. And I hated sociology. I was like, why are they teaching me theories about white dead men? That was what I always thought. But I loved psychology in it, and I loved statistics, which really applies to AI today. So fast forward later, you know, I went into admin, went into digital media. I always tend to have this drive and itchy feet every 2 years. It's like a 2-year cycle. Sometimes it's shorter, but you know, after 2 years, I'm like, I want more, I want more, I want more. So out of my wanting more, I ended up back in the UK to study masters. My masters, I did it in marketing, communication, and design. I didn't have any marketing background, but I started getting calls to do marketing. I was like, yeah, easy, transferable skills. Did marketing, moved to Ireland, and then I got a call to join Google. I had a 10-minute interview. People are like, that never happens. But I had a 10-minute interview on the phone. And then I ended up being a contractor with Google. Then I converted to a full-time employee. But the time I got into Google, it just awakened the techie in me, right? It was just amazing to be in this highly innovative company that just pushes the boundaries, and they just try everything. I was on the sales side. I was a product specialist, but I was still in the company, right? So anytime we had our sales conferences, and you see the demos from the people from Mountain View and all the technological products, it was always amazing. It blows everyone's mind. But I think that started bringing out that tech hunger in me, and I was, you know, trying to make my way back into tech. So I moved from shopping, different advertising products, to Google Travel. I was a product lead for EMEA for a couple of years. And again, I started having my usual itchy feet. I want more. Then I happened to attend a sales training for machine learning. And that, you know, as they say, the rest is history. I was like, wow, you mean you can actually program, you know, do some programming that will come up with some output and results that you never told it to come up with. It wasn't, ML is not like your typical programming languages, right? Because these AI, that's why we have this problem, because these AI systems are coming up with their own results. So you didn't tell it, you know, you don't tell ChatGPT to lie to people, but it does, right? So I found it very fascinating, and that's how my career started building there. I started doing things outside Google, speaking about it, then I came across the racial bias in it and the responsible side of it, and I was like, no way, I'm not gonna leave this, you know, I was like, if this is the last thing I do on Earth, if it's just to spread awareness about this problem, I'm not going to leave this earth without doing it. I thought of my kids. I was like, if we're automating discrimination and injustice in technologies where, you know, once it's out, it's like a wildfire. We don't know where it's gone. We don't know who is impacted, and we cannot call it back. And I'm like, no, you know, so I started doing some work there, worked with women in AI, you know, then went back to Google AI and said, this is all the work I'm doing outside Google. Can I work with you guys? And that's how I got in. And I ended up working with the team as a program manager responsible for AI for about 3 years. And I just recently left Google a couple of months ago to do more of this.
Wow, it's a whirlwind that's so impressive and really, really exciting. I also love that you've taken this on as a personal passion, right, that you've lived through and experienced, but also you're bringing a very holistic view to it, not coming from a deep tech background, let's say, and I guess this seems to be a huge part of the problem, that the people not just using this technology but building this technology are from a really specific demographic. So as we're at an education forum, let's take this back a couple of steps. How are we ever going to build inclusive technology if the people building it themselves are not inclusive? And you know, what would be maybe some solutions you have or thoughts you have around that?
It's a big problem, right? We know that the tech ratio is white percent, 70% white male, 30% other. And this has been here for a long time. I think it's a pipeline problem, right? So back to my story of the stereotypes and, you know, engineering is seen to be for men. We have very few female girls, you know, very few girls or females actually join computer science courses in the university. And even when they do, they drop out because, again, they're a minority. They feel choked, right? It's a bit misogynistic as well. And then even if they do finally graduate from computer science, they get into the careers, and again, they feel choked, right? So I always hear, we need more role models, we need more female role models, we need more minority leaders and stuff like that, because it's not a culture that a lot of people who are not white male thrive. So that's the beginning of the problem. So I think it's trying to see how we can break the tech culture, the tech bro culture. And it starts from the universities, really, or even starts from home, because part of this problem is, you know, you have boys, you have girls. The boys do play computer games with dad, and the girls are supposed to be in the kitchen with mom. So that mindset is already starting where, computer is not for me, I don't want to do it. And that leads to the lack of diversity we have in the field today. So if we can help with the pipeline problem, then we can help drive further diversity in the field, especially with AI. And now, it's a leading technology and it's going to be here for a while. We need to make sure that the teams building this technology are diverse, because that's the beginning of the problem we have. These things I've talked about, like the example I gave with Alan Turing, it wouldn't have been a problem if we have the likes of Alan Turing in the same room as the other people building this thing, because it's going to make sure that this thing is not going to discriminate against people who think like him or talk like him, right?
I was totally unaware of that. That was a real curious, perspective, let's say, and how different things could be, when the makers themselves experience this type of discrimination, and that they're obviously hypersensitive to it and consider and understand that worldview to build it into their models, let's say. We're from South Summit, right? So we feel enormous responsibility in smashing the tech bro culture, to be honest, and I think we're nailing that when you have leaders that look and act a different way, and I think we're very proud to say that, and you're absolutely invited back to South Summit in June. We have a very different dynamic and atmosphere and culture around that as a pure tech and startup event, right? So I'd be keen for you to see that and maybe even help us along the way to keep that going. But in terms of back to the education sector, so if majority of white males are coming through STEM, is there an opportunity to fast track change, right, and not to have to wait for all of these guys to graduate and get more girls through the program? Do you think maybe there's an opportunity to create more interdisciplinary teams within the corporates and the startups and the companies who are building these technologies to bring in those views from other areas, let's say? Because the sense I get from some technology developers is that, well, I'm going to build it, I'm going to make the coolest and fastest and strongest AI or whatever for the purpose that I'm building it for, and then I will hand it off to the security team, and then I will hand it off to the marketing team, and then I will hand it off, So I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity, kind of like yourself, you came in from a different perspective and a different experience to, auditing the technologies you were using, thinking, hang on a minute, do we not understand what's happening here? And if not, why? And how can we change that? Do you think there's an opportunity to, at the earlier stages, introduce those teams, perhaps? Because I definitely find from technology teams, they see it as somebody else's responsibility. Or is there an opportunity for the corporates or the developers to bring in that kind of responsible and ethical auditing way earlier on in the process, and maybe like they try and do now with cybersecurity and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the silos need to drop, right? I think we need to start building with a responsible AI framework in mind, which means responsible AI as a field is multidisciplinary. It's not going to, the field is not going to exist if it's only tech people, right? And I had the social science background, which is helping in the field today. We have legal teams, we have sociologists, we have anthropologists, we have human rights folks. You need to have a wide range of people working on this technology. So one of the things we did with Google before Lambda wasn't quite launched, but before we released the paper, was make sure we had a multidisciplinary team, which I actually led that project. And we made sure we had the legal team, we had the UX designers, we had the tech people, right? So it's not just the developers building this thing, because to your point, the developers are just thinking of making sure that this product works. That's all they're after, right? It just has to work. It comes out with results, and it has to be a little bit accurate. And if it's not any of that, they're not even going to test for it. So they never test for the outputs. They're not going to test to say, is this result, this response that this application is given, is it actually correct? Is it driving any stereotypes? Or even with the images, they're not testing for how many male CEOs are represented in an image search. So this is where you need the perspective of other people involved. And the other people are like the ethicists as well, and all of that. There's also another part of the field which is called community participatory research. It's very important. A lot of people are not doing it. Google does it, to a certain extent. But this way, you have conversations with the community people, the community members. If you're building a technology that will be adopted by people in Madrid, have a chat with the people in Madrid before you launch it. Tell them your idea. It's just like product by design, right? And all those principles. You apply it on the overall AI framework, right? So you have a conversation with them. they may not know what it is you're trying to do. Yes, it might improve their lives and they're not used to that technology, but they can give you some feedback. And then when you build the beta phase, talk to them as well. And another thing I say is, do not be so quick to launch, to do a full launch to everyone. Launch it out in phases. This is a typical product management cycle, right? And we should apply it in AI. We have the alpha phase, we have the beta phase before we have full launch. Let's do it that way. Google did that with Bard because they knew how powerful this technology is, and they were trying to be careful. They were pushed to come out with Bard, of course, because of the AI arms race, but they still made sure that at least they launched it, silently to within the Googlers in the company first, got the feedback, fine-tuned the model, then they launched it to some trusted users before they launched it out in the wild. So I think the more we are aware of these issues, the more we should make sure that we change the way we have been doing things, right? Change the processes and encompass everyone's point of view first, everyone that you feel should have a voice on the table, including people of the community before launching it. And even when it's launched, we need to keep on reiterating the process and fine-tuning and adjusting the model, because especially with generative AI, they keep on coming up with capabilities that they were not taught, that we did not expect, and we need to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, okay, amazing. So do you see in the larger corporates that there are dedicated teams doing this now at this point, or are we not there yet?
They are, but they're quite small. And at the end of the day, they are working on something, but is it really across all the products and applications? How much of a say and influence do they have?
This is where I'm going. So,
right.
And congratulations on the framework. I think this is so timely and so needed. And is the book out already?
The book is out,
The book is out, so this is a great guide to be able to refer back to for business leaders, entrepreneurs, corporates, everybody. And so I think, what is your ambition for this framework? Can you see that potentially becoming a tool, becoming a software? Like, is it like a manual guide for these teams who are trying to create these systems internally? And what are the levers internally that can be used? Because again, typical things like what's not getting, measured doesn't get done. So what kind of incentives do you think need to be there to ensure kind of accountability and responsibility within these organizations that have such enormous product suites?
Yeah. Back to your first question, because you had about 100 in that statement. I'm joking. But yeah, my dream is really to have a tool that just reflects this framework. It's going to be so difficult to build, and we need to be able to write the Python code and all that, but that's my dream. Anytime I think about it, I'm like, I'd love to get there, because then it helps everyone, right? You just have a tool, and you just run a test on your AI model before launching it, or your application, and it tells you, hey, in terms of fairness metrics towards people from Spain, for instance, it's 97% inaccurate, you need to fix X, Y, Z. Amazing. We help people rather than accusing people. You're not doing it right, and not giving them, a lever or a way to help them improve the model. So that's the first thing. And then, in terms of incentives, right? Regulation is a big thing here. We have the EU AI Act coming out very soon. So that incentivizes people. And beyond that, for any organization, most people want to make profits. You want to still have a very good turnover and a very good revenue at the end of the year. If you have products and applications that are useful for everyone in the society and not harmful, then you're going to make more turnover than you're making today, because you're having products that can be adopted and used by everyone in the world, right? So you're extending your reach. So that's another reason why it's really important to actually build it responsibly, especially if you're someone who doesn't really care about these things, you just feel like it doesn't affect me personally, why should I bother, right? So these are the two main things, and then there's a lot of reputational risk as well, especially if it's a very large corporation, right? I've mentioned Amazon, I've mentioned Google, Apple, literally all the big tech have had these issues. They don't like it. And sometimes when it happens, their stocks just go down. And, we start having that stocks rise and dropping thing that keeps on happening as a cycle. So it is important to build your tools and applications and products responsibly. And there's so many benefits that come out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, right? That it's a market opportunity, essentially. If you're looking at a bigger market, it's a bigger market opportunity. Exactly. And of course, the opportunity cost then of potentially something going disastrously wrong. And it seems to be a momentum as well with today's generation at all levels that people are just not okay with this anymore. Yes. You know what I mean? And if you're shown to not be acting responsibly in the tools that you're building, I don't think the market's really going to, act favorably towards that. So before we wrap up, I don't want to hold everybody from the coffee break. I know they're dying to get going and dying to get networking. We're very much here about making the connections. Just final words of encouragement and opportunities, maybe two sets. The entrepreneurs, like what still needs to be built, what are the opportunities there for the entrepreneurs in this space of responsible AI, and the users. We're full here of students, of teachers, of professors, of educators, of business leaders. You know, what are the things as users that we should be bearing in mind to ensure that the products we're using are responsible?
Yeah, I think for the entrepreneurs, just remember that, you know, starting a business should be to solve a problem, right? Really, that should be the main aim. Like, why do you exist if you're not solving a problem? And it could be any problem, you know. And then, you know, that will help determine what type of AI application or model that you're going to use to solve that problem if you're going down the AI route. And then you need to be aware of its limitations, right? For example, if you're going to work with facial recognition, which is a main problem in AI, be aware of the limitations. And then you can build a product that is conducive for everyone, because now you've built it in the right framework, having a responsible ethical AI hat on, and it will be useful for everyone. So that will help with the expansion and the market opportunity that you've mentioned. Now, with the rest of everyone in here, the educators and the students and the users, again, AI literacy is key, because AI is here to stay. You know, a few years ago, people were like, I don't like this AI. I really don't want it. But look, whether we like it or not, it's here to stay. We're in the fourth industrial revolution. Some people argue it's the fifth. I don't care. We are in an industrial revolution, and whether we like it or not, right, something is going to keep on happening in the AI space. If OpenAI did not launch ChatGPT, another startup would have, right? If Microsoft did not invest in OpenAI, someone else would have. So there's a race going on here, and it's important for us to understand what it is, how we can use it for our benefit, because it does have a lot of potential. It really, really does. And it's not, this is not just, you know, an AI market pitch, right? It can help you at your job and make your job life so much easier. But we need to think about how we can leverage it, right? We're still humans. We're still the ones who built this thing. I mean, not me and you, but we, you know, human beings built it. And, you know, I know there's lots of talks with the educators, and, you know, there's complaints about the students may not be able to work on their critical thinking skills. But how about you let a student use ChatGPT and then talk a little bit more about that essay that they wrote with ChatGPT and test their critical thinking skills, but on a higher level, right? So now we're having some assistance that we didn't have before. So how do we push ourselves to the next level to still leverage on this tool, but get to a stage where, again, as humans, we're happier because we don't need to do so much hard, mundane tasks, right? But we can still think critically and still solve problems that we're meant to solve.
Yeah, that's well said and fantastically spoken. I'm really excited to see what the students do with it, what you guys do with all of this, because we can only guess and assume and maybe sometimes criticize, but I'm sure they'll be far more creative with their critical thinking than we were in terms of the potential of the tool. Toju, thank you so much for being with us here today. A warm round of applause, please, for Toju. Thank you.
Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.